Okay, here's a question to kick us off. What if that biblical idea, becoming partakers of the divine nature, what if it's not just like a nice metaphor?
Like from the second letter of Peter, right?
Ah,
The idea that it points to something real, something transformative within us.
exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We've got this really fascinating lecture by Neville Goddard. It's called Partakers of the Divine Nature from December 6th, 1968.
Ah, Goddard. Yeah, he definitely takes familiar ideas in some unexpected directions. So we're looking at his interpretation of biblical text, Paul, the Gospels.
Yeah, exactly. Paul's letters, the Gospels, even gets into the Old Testament law. But he reframes it all through this really specific psychological lens. It's quite different.
Okay, so the listener should expect some, let's say, unconventional interpretations of Scripture here.
Absolutely. But the goal isn't really to debate theology. It's more about exploring the potential for those aha moments, seeing these texts and maybe your own potential from a totally new angle.
Right. A fresh perspective.
Yeah.
So where does he start with that verse from Peter?
He does. That core idea, God granting precious and very great promises so that you may become partakers of the divine nature.
And the implication is pretty radical, isn't it? Not just receiving grace, but actually becoming divine in some sense.
That's the core of it, yeah. It's a huge idea, and he connects it straight to the concept of the gospel. He looks at Paul in Romans.
Where Paul identifies the gospel with Jesus Christ,
Right.
the power of God for salvation.
Right. Then he brings in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5:17, where Jesus says he came to fulfill the law and prophets, not abolish them.
Okay.
So Goddard puts forward this idea, what if the gospel is that fulfillment? Not just a person, Jesus Christ, but also like a plan, a story.
A story that enters the world.
That's interesting. So it's both a person and a kind of divine narrative.
Kind of. He suggests that this story, this gospel, when you hear it and you truly accept it, really believe it,
Yeah.
it starts something within you.
Like a catalyst. Exactly. He says everything the gospel describes about Jesus, the whole pattern eventually happens in you, the believer. It's not just history. It's a power.
A power that lifts you from, what do you call it? Eternal death.
Yeah, lifts you from eternal death to everlasting life. And the ultimate endpoint of this whole internal process.
Becoming a partaker of the divine nature.
Becoming God, essentially. That's his interpretation. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. So
Yeah.
how does this transformation actually happen, according to Goddard? Is there a process?
He describes one, yes. It's about first hearing the gospel story. Then you have to consciously consent to it, believe it.
Okay. Hearing, consenting, believing.
And then allowing it to engraft itself onto your being, like planting a seed through faith.
And this engrafting, what does it lead to?
It leads to what he calls an eruption. It's the moment the whole story, the whole pattern of Jesus Christ fully unfolds within you, personally.
Wow. An eruption. So after this intervent, what changes? How does your perspective shift?
Well, one of the first things, he says, is you start to spiritualize the Torah. You reinterpret the Old Testament law psychologically.
Okay, give me an example.
He uses the classic one, you shall not commit adultery, the literal act. But Jesus already pushed that, saying looking with lust is adultery in the heart.
Right, the internal state matters.
Goddard takes that principle and applies it across the board. He's suggesting all the commandments can be understood psychologically as principles governing your inner world. It's not about external actions anymore, primarily.
That makes sense. Moving beyond the literal, does he give another, maybe more complex example?
He gives a fantastic one. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Exodus 23:19.
Ah, okay. The basis for huge parts of kosher dietary law, right? Keeping meat and dairy separate. That's a massive practical application based on the literal reading.
Exactly. It's been practiced for millennia based on that literal command. Very important.
So what's Goddard's psychological take? It must be quite different.
Totally different. He says the kid thinks sacrificial lamb represents the unwanted things in your world, the problems, the things you wish weren't there.
Okay, the kid is the unwanted circumstance.
And the mother's milk, the thing that sustains the kid, that's your attention, your focus.
Ah, I see where this is going. Attention feeds the problem.
Precisely. And boiling, that's dwelling on it, wrestling with it mentally, getting agitated about the unwanted thing.
So boiling the kid in its mother's milk means focusing your attention intensely on the very problem you want to get rid of.
You got it. By giving it all that mental energy, that attention, the milk, you keep it alive and cooking boiling in your reality.
So the interpretation is stop feeding the problem with your attention.
Exactly. The solution, Goddard says, is to sacrifice the kid, withdraw your attention from the unwanted, and deliberately place your focus, your attention on what you do want instead.
That's a powerful reframing. It shifts responsibility entirely inward, doesn't it?
Completely. And this leads directly into his teaching on the power of imaginal acts.
Okay, tell me about those.
He says you have total freedom to decide what you want and then to act it out mentally, in your imagination.
So how does that work, practically?
It's pretty straightforward in theory. First, you decide clearly what you want to be your experience. Then, you create a short mental scene that implies you already have it. Not the getting of it, but the having of it.
Right, the end result.
Yes. And then you step into that scene in your imagination, feel it, sense it, react naturally within it as if it were physically real right now.
You just do that.
You do that, feel it real, and then this is crucial. You drop it. You let it go. You don't obsess over how it will happen in the outer world.
You trust the process.
You trust that the consequences take over, as he puts it. Your imaginal act sets things in motion, and your external reality will shift to reflect it, maybe through unexpected events, people, opportunities.
So the how isn't your job. Your job is the imaginal act itself.
That's the idea. He uses an example. Someone wanting to be head of a company. They'd imagine being the head, feeling the responsibility, sitting in the office, whatever implies fulfillment.
And then circumstances would shift.
Yeah.
Maybe a promotion, maybe an offer somewhere else.
Could be anything. But he also points out something important. Achieving one desire often creates a new situation, with new responsibilities, maybe new challenges, new desires.
So it's a cycle. You achieve something, the landscape changes, and you need to decide and imagine again.
Exactly. It's a continuous process of deciding and creating from within.
Now, how does he tie this back to Christ? You mentioned Christ earlier.
He does. He circles back and says, remember, Christ is the power of God. Christ is the gospel.
Okay.
But then he introduces this image, Christ as the pattern man, or even the semen of God, the germ, the seed of God.
Wow, strong imagery.
It is. The idea is that this pattern, this divine seed, is dormant within everyone. And when you truly believe the gospel story, this seed, it awakens. It starts to grow, to erupt within you.
So Christ isn't just an external figure, but an internal potential, a pattern unfolding in you.
That's the core of his mystical interpretation. It's a blueprint for your own divinity, activated by faith in the story.
And this is all happening inwardly. People on the outside wouldn't necessarily see anything different.
Not necessarily, no. You could be going through this profound inner transformation, this Christ pattern awakening, and outwardly, you seem the same. You might even face disbelief if you tried to explain it.
That makes sense. It's deeply personal.
Now, you mentioned applying this to everyday life, too, not just spiritual awakening.
Yes, definitely. He stresses that this principle decide, imagine fulfillment, let go, works just as well for achieving things in the world of Caesar, as he calls it, the external material world.
So for money, career, relationships.
Anything. He tells this great story about his friend Victor. Victor started as an adagio dancer, then became a maitre d'.
Okay.
And Victor apparently used this principle quite deliberately to make money in the stock market. He'd imagine having a certain amount, say $5,000, feel it real, and it would manifest.
Well, he just imagined the money.
He imagined the state of having the money. Then he aimed higher, imagined having more, lived through the market ups and downs, but kept applying the principle.
It worked. Apparently so, according to Goddard. But the story also illustrates that achieving the desire, the money, brought new situations. Managing it, market risks, the cycle again.
Right. New challenges, requiring new imaginal acts.
Exactly. And God also mentions that even with the success, Victor still wrestled with his background. He came from a rigid Catholic Italian family, and those deep-seated beliefs sometimes clashed with Goddard's idea of Christ as an internal pattern.
That shows how powerful those early beliefs can be, even when you're consciously working with different ideas.
Definitely. It's a real struggle sometimes.
This is fascinating. What other major concepts does he cover in this lecture?
Well, he goes into this really profound idea about God's ultimate purpose.
Yeah.
He suggests God's intention is to give himself entirely to each individual.
Give himself. How so?
As if you were the only person in existence. He brings up John 17, where Jesus talks about revealing the Father's name.
So that the love with which you have loved me may be in them and I in them.
That's the one. Goddard interprets this as God desiring this incredibly intimate, complete union with every single one of us. Not a distant God, but one seeking total merging.
That paints a very different picture of the divine relationship. Very personal.
Extremely personal, and this ties back to spiritualizing the commandments. Once that Christ pattern starts awakening in you, your understanding deepens.
You see beyond the literal rules to the underlying psychological or spiritual principles.
Exactly. He revisits dietary laws, for instance, quoting Jesus, "It's not what goes into the belly, but what comes out of the heart that defiles." And Paul's saying nothing is unclean in itself.
Right. It's the inner state, the belief that makes something unclean for you.
He even shares a personal story here. He was a vegetarian for years, apparently. Then one day he decided to eat salmon,
Okay.
and he got violently ill. Not because salmon is inherently bad, but because, he says, he had internal quibbles, inner conflict and doubt about breaking his own long-held rule.
So his own belief, his own internal state created the negative physical reaction.
That was his conclusion. There is nothing inherently unclean. It is our attitude or belief that imbues it with that quality. It all comes back to the inner world.
Which connects to that verse, the Lord sees not as man sees. The Lord looks on the heart.
Precisely, 1 Samuel 16.7. Judgment isn't based on outer appearances or actions, but the inner state, the heart, the imagination.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? He touches on this, how many people, even deeply religious ones, might miss this inner meaning entirely.
He does suggest that many people, maybe even high-ranking religious figures, could be focused solely on the external story, the historical figure, and completely miss the Christ within, the pattern waiting to awaken in them.
Focused on the outer, while the real mystery is unfolding or waiting to unfold inside.
Right, exactly. It's a mystical interpretation through and through.
So does he offer any final practical advice in the lecture? A way to apply this?
He does. He suggests a simple practice. Go into the silence, that state of inner quiet and stillness.
Okay, meditation or just quiet contemplation?
Seems like it.
Yeah.
And in that state, make a clear decision about what you desire. Then, vividly, act out its fulfillment in your imagination. Just for a moment, but make it real.
The imaginal act again.
Yes. Perform that act in the silence, feel its reality, and then he assures you, the listener, that circumstances will rearrange themselves to match that imaginal act. The outer world will conform.
Trust the inner action to produce the outer result.
That's the essence of it.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping this up, the main takeaway from this deep dive into Goddard seems to be this potential for a really deep inner shift.
Yeah, it's about seeing the gospel not just as history, but as this active living pattern, a plan, almost that can ignite within you through belief.
Leading ultimately to participating in the divine nature itself.
That's the promise he explores.
It leaves you with a pretty big question to ponder, doesn't it?
It really does. If this divine spark, this whole story of redemption, is actually waiting within you, how does that change things?
How does it change how you see yourself, your potential, the world around you? If ancient wisdom is also a map of your own mind.
What are the implications? It's definitely something to reflect on.
Absolutely. This has been quite the exploration. There's so much more in Goddard's work, of course, but this gives a real flavor of his perspective.
Definitely encourage listeners to explore further if this resonates. Consider what these ideas might mean for you personally.